So in the last video, we talked about Agile methodology. So this video, we're going to talk about Agile testing, right? What is the testing team activities in the Agile team, and what is the Agile testing process that fits into Agile methodology, right? So what is Agile testing? So Agile testing is a testing practice that follows the rules and principles of Agile software development. So unlike the Waterfall model, so Agile testing can begin at start of the project with continuous integration between development and testing. So in Waterfall model, we do like testing after development activity is done. But in Agile testing, so both development and testing goes in parallel. So it's basically Agile testing is not sequential but continuous, right? So here are the things, activities in the Agile testing. So Agile testing, we have like Agile test plan, Agile testing strategies, Agile testing quadrant, right? So what are the challenges in Agile software development process? And there is some limitations for automation in Agile process that we want to discuss today. Right? So what is the Agile test plan? Right? So Agile test plan includes types of testing done in that iteration, like test data requirements, infrastructure, test environments, and test results. Right? So unlike Waterfall and Agile model, the test plan is written and updated for every release. Right? So for every sprint, there is a test plan written. Like it is, if you start in the beginning of the sprint, you create a test plan. So for every sprint, we want to update the test plan. So what is there in the test plan is what is software testing, why testing is important, the testing scope, right? New functionalities which are being tested, levels and types of testing based on the features complexity, load and performance, infrastructure considerations like what is the test environment, hardware and software and things like that. What is the mitigations and risk plan and resourcing, like what are the team, how many resources, team number of testing team members required, and things like that, and deliverables and milestones are all tracked in a Agile test plan, right? We'll see sample Agile software test plan, so you will understand how the structure of the test plan and what are the things included in the test plan. Right? So here is the testing strategy in Agile environment. So we have like iteration 0, that is initiation of the project. So just like sprint 1 or something like that. Then there will be a continuous iteration, like number of sprint cycles. So delivers a working system that meets changing needs of the stakeholders. Right? Each iteration has a working system that is delivered for the business, for the client, right? Then release, right? So once this iteration is done, it's deployed into production, and in the production it gets operated and supported, right? So for each iteration, there is an incremental release going on, and this cycle repeats until the whole process is completed, right? So this is the Agile testing process in the Agile methodology. Right, so iteration 0. So what is iteration 0, right? So in the first stage of iteration 0, you perform like initial setup of the testing environment, right? So it includes people for testing, right? You're going to identify the testing team members. So installing testing tools, scheduling resources, right? These are like iteration 0, all the setup, right? Establishing a business case for the project, establishing boundary conditions for the project scope. So like what are we going to test, and what is the scope of this project and things like that. So outlining key requirements, use cases that drive the design trade-offs, outline one or more candidates for architecture, identifying the risks, cost estimation, and preparing a preliminary project. Now, this is basically more like a planning stage. Iteration 0 is more like a planning stage, and probably we're going to do like test plans and things like that in the iteration 0. Then the construction construction iterations, right? So the second phase is building the iterations, right? So in each iteration, in this iterations, majority of the testing occurs. So this phase is observed as a set of iterations to build an increment of the solution. Right? So we talked about an increment before. So we're going to build an increment of the solution in each iteration, right? So the team implements the hybrid practice of XP. XP is like extreme programming, Scrum, Agile modeling, and Agile data, and so on, right? So in continuous iteration, Agile team follows prioritized requirement practice. So for each iteration, they take most essential requirements remaining from work item, stack, and implement them. So basically, there's like we take it from product backlog, move it to sprint backlog, and we complete the sprint backlog items in the iteration and test that complete the testing part, right? So that is a continuous iteration, right? So basically, there are two types of testing done in the continuous iteration: confirmatory testing and investigative testing. So confirmatory testing concentration verifying the system fulfills the intent of the stakeholders, right? As described to the team to date and is performed by the team. While investigating testing, it detects the problems that confirmatory team has skipped or ignored. Right? There is two levels of testing, right? So one is just following testing requirements and testing it, and the other is finding any other open issues or other things in the iteration, right? So investigating testing, tester determines the potential problems in the form of defect stories, right? So it can be like sometimes when you are doing testing, you probably find like missing items and things like that. So then we're going to create new stories to fulfill, and that gets added to the sprint backlog. So product backlog, right? So that's why investigative testing is done. So it can be like investigating testing is issues found in the integration testing, load or stress testing, or security testing, right? That is basically it's like a non-functional testing. That is investigative testing, right? So then again for confirmatory testing, there are also two aspects: developer testing and agile testing. So developer testing is basically unit testing, and Agile acceptance testing is actually the acceptance testing that testing team or users will do. So confirmatory testing is Agile equivalent of testing to the specification, right? The testing as per the requirements, right? And so Agile acceptance testing is combination of traditional functional testing and traditional acceptance testing, as the development team and stakeholders are doing it together, right? So here the development team, in the sense, both developers and the testers, right? Where developers testing a mix of traditional unit testing and traditional service integration testing. Developer testing verifies both application code and database schema, right? So each iteration there will be unit testing and acceptance testing done as part of the Agile testing, right? Then the third phase is the release end game or transition phase, right? So for each iteration, we're going to release it as a completed product or as an increment, right? So these activities include in this phase are training of end users, support people, and operational people. Also, it includes marketing of the product release, right? Backup restore, finalization of system, and user documentation, right? So it will be released to the end user at the end of the iteration, right? The final Agile methodology testing stage includes full system testing and acceptance testing, right? So we do like a full system testing and acceptance testing before this release. So in accordance to finish your final testing stage without any obstacles, we should have to test the product more rigorously while it is in continuous integration. So in order to avoid like last minute problems, so the testing should be more rigorous during the continuous iterations, right? So during the end game, testers will be working on its defect stories, right? So this is the end game. Then finally it goes to production, and product will be moved to the production stage. That is the last stage. So these are the 4 stages in the agile testing strategies. There will be iteration 0, it's kind of like initiation of the project, continuous iterations, then incremental release, and going to the production. So these are the stages in the agile testing process, right? And this testing in agile testing is divided into 4 quadrants, right? Agile testing quadrants, right? How it is handled. The first quadrant is basically unit test and component testing. Second quadrant is basically functional testing, story testing, prototypes, simulations. Third one is exploratory testing, UAT and acceptance testing. Fourth one is performance load and security testing, right? So these are some of the, suppose the unit test, the quadrant 1 is mostly automated, quadrant 2 is automated and manual, quadrant 3 is manual, quadrant 4 is tools, based on the tools, right? Performance load and all is based on the available tools. So these are various quadrants in agile testing. So basically in the quadrant 1 you have like unit test and component test, right? So basically the internal code quality is the main focus of this quadrant, and it consists of test cases which are technology driven and are implemented to support the team, right? This is mostly done by developers, right? So agile quadrant 2, so it basically combines test cases that are business driven or implemented to support the team, right? So this quadrant focuses on requirements, right? So testing examples of possible scenarios and workflows, testing of user experience such as prototype, pair testing, and things like that. This is basically the testing activity, right? Then quadrant 3 is basically acceptance testing, right? Usability testing, exploratory testing, pair testing with customers, collaborative testing, and user acceptance testing. Right? The test cases can be used as a basis to perform automation testing. Even you can implement automation in this quadrant, right? So many rounds of iteration reviews are carried out, which builds confidence in this product, right? So this is the third quadrant. So what is the fourth quadrant? So the fourth quadrant concentrates on non-functional requirements, right? So here we concentrate on more on performance, security, and stability. So with this help of this quadrant, the application is made deliver non-functional qualities and expected value. Like so basically, what are non-functional testings? Like stress and performance, security, infrastructure, data migration, scalability. So we'll have a session on this later on, but you just aware of this quadrant for now. So I will explain these in, later on in some other video. So these are 4 quadrants as part of agile testing, right? So to understand these 4 different quadrants. So let us look at what are some of the challenges and in the agile testing process, and what are the risks in the automation while in agile methodologies. So let's look at some of the challenges in the agile development, right? So chances of error are more in agile, as documentation is given less priority, eventually puts more pressure on QA, right? So this is one disadvantage, right? So because there is less importance for documentation, so you'll get more errors, right? So you have to test multiple times sometimes, and QA team needs to be more we need to plan more all the scenarios, not to skip bugs and things like that, because there's not much documentation, less documentation is available, right? So the second one, new features are introduced quickly, so which reduces the available time for test teams to identify whether latest features are according to the requirement and does it truly address the business suits, because Agile allows you to update new requirements. This gives less time to the testing team to test, right? Sometimes testers are required to play a semi-developer role, right? So semi-developer role means you have to take some of the activities of developer also sometimes. So test execution cycles are highly compressed because we are testing it within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, even within 2 weeks. So development takes 1 week time, and you may have like 1 week time to test, and very compressed cycles, very less time to prepare a test plan, right? So for regression also there is a very minimal time. Changing the role from being a gatekeeper of quality to being a partner in quality, right? So basically we are also participating with the team. So we want to ensure the quality is combined responsibility of both developers and testing team to keep the product quality, right? So requirement changes and updates are inherent in any agile method, so become biggest challenge for QA, right? Because of all these things, these are some of the challenges in the agile development method. So also, if you are doing automation, there is some kind of risks for automation in agile process. Anyway, our topic is mainly for manual testing, but you can understand these risks for automation. So once you become like automation engineer, so you can also keep these points in mind, right? So automation UI provides high level of confidence, but they are slow to execute, fragile to maintain, and expensive to build. So automation, creating automation scripts, it takes time, and we need to update these scripts regularly, and it's expensive to build. So automation engineers are costlier, right? They charge more for their manual testers, right? So automation may not significantly improve test productivity unless the testers know how to test, right? So it depends on the tester's knowledge, what are the things they are automating and what kind of tests they are automating, right? So unreliable tests are a major concern in automated testing, right? So when you create automated tests, sometimes the test fails because of the script issues, right? So we need to monitor that, right? Fixing failed tests and resolving issues related to brittle tests should be a top priority in order to avoid false positives. False positives in the sense the application actually works, but the automation test fails, something like that, right? So we need to maintain these automated tests regularly to avoid these false positives, right? So if the automated tests are initially manual rather than through CI, continuous integration, there is a risk that they are not regularly running and therefore may cause of failing of tests, right? So automation tests are not a replacement for exploratory manual testing, right? So automation test cannot replace the manual testing part. To obtain the quality of the product, mixture of both testing types is required. So these are some of the risks for automation in agile process that needs to be taken care of. And also these are some of the points. So you can go over this slide to understand so what are the various risks in the agile process, right? So automation may propose and deliver testing solutions that require too much ongoing maintenance relative to the value provided. So automated testing may lack the expertise to conceive and deliver effective solutions. Automation testing may be successful, that they run out of important problems to solve, thus turn into unimportant problems. So these are some of the risks when you are doing automation testing. So just to have an idea, so I listed here, so you can use it as a reference, right? So what is the conclusion? So basically this is Agile testing strategies. So what are the strategies? So basically Agile methodology is in software involves testing as early as possible in the software development cycle. So that is our main goal, right? So we want to test as early as possible. So it demands higher customer involvement and testing code as soon as it becomes available, right? That is the main goal. And code should be stable enough to take to the system test, right? So these are various activities as part of the Agile testing. That extensive regression testing can be done to make sure that bugs are fixed and tested. Mainly communicate between team makes Agile testing more successful. So the interaction between teams is the main factor that makes the Agile testing model successful. So everybody should cooperate and try to improve the quality of the product in the Agile team, right? So that is Agile testing strategies summary, right? So go and watch this video again, and if you have any questions, we can discuss in further sessions.